Hello and welcome back. My name's Hannah and I'm a physiotherapist at Core Health Physiotherapy and Pilates, and today I'm going to talk to you about hip mobility. Now, hip mobility can be important for a few reasons, not just for athletes but for everyday life, such as squatting down to pick something up off the ground. So hip mobility can be associated with a few conditions such as osteoarthritis of the hip joint and femoral acetabular impingement, which is a pinching at the front of the hip joint. And if you have these conditions, you might have reduced range, particularly in flexion and internal rotation. So having good hip mobility is important for preventing injuries such as lower back pain or knee pain, as if you have reduced range of your hip joint, your lower back is going to be doing more of the load. So say when you bend over, instead of using your hip to move, you're going to be using your lower back. So it's important that we have good mobility to prevent any of these other injuries or pain. So today I'm going to take you through a few exercises which will help improve hip mobility. These exercises are not for everyone, so it's important to check with one of the staff here or your physiotherapist to make sure these are appropriate for you and your condition. So this first exercise, you're going to be starting in a Z-sit position. And what you're going to do, you're going to have your feet planted and you're going to move your knees from one side to the other, keeping your feet still. This first one is done with your hands behind your back. So if you don't have very good hip range of movement, this is a good position to start, leaning back slightly onto your hands. Then to progress this, you want to be able to do it without your hands on the ground. So we're sitting up nice and tall, and as you can see, you need a bit more hip mobility because you are not leaning back anymore, you're sitting up nice and tall. So same movement, your feet stay planted and you're going to rock from side to side. And next progression of this is doing a circle. So for this one, you're starting with your feet together, knees dropped out to the side. Then you're going to swing one leg around, so your knee comes onto the ground. You're going to come up into a hip thrust, and then you're going to leg circle around. So this is a similar movement as the other one, but it's a bit more advanced as you have to go through further range of movement of the hip joint. The next exercise is hip cars, and this is controlled movements of the hip joint. And for this exercise, we're first starting in quadruped. So this is on hands and knees. So your hands are under your shoulders, your knees are under your hips, so you're in a nice square position. Then we're taking one knee off the ground, bringing it down up towards your chest, and you come out to the side and around, so the leg goes back out straight and then brings it back in again. Then you're going to do a few this way, and then we can do the opposite movement. So this is a nice one because you're getting hip extension, abduction, and then back into flexion. Then the next progression for this exercise is in a half kneel. So this position, you can use a foam roller to help balance because it's not about your balance, it's about the hip movement. So you're going to bring that knee up off the front leg, up off the ground, and it comes around in a circle. So you bring your leg out into abduction, then it comes into internal rotation, around into extension, and then it comes back again. The last exercise is a hip distraction exercise. So what we're going to use here is a band, so it can be a TheraBand or a Reebok band. The band goes around the thigh and it's going to be pulling the leg out to the side. So it's doing a lateral glide of the hip joint. So the band really needs to be up nice and high in the hip, in the groin area, so that it's pulling on the femur and pulling it out. This is going to pull it out of the socket just a little bit and distract that hip joint. And then we're doing a flexion and extension range of movement forwards and backwards. So this is nice because the band is doing the passive movement, pulling the leg out to the side, and will help get a bit more range of movement in that ball and socket joint. Then we're going to do the same thing, but the band is pulling posteriorly, so it's pulling backwards. So again, it's nice and high in the hip, and it's pulling on the femur, and pulling that head out of the socket just a little bit, which will help with this flexion extension range. So these distraction exercises are quite nice and feel really good for someone who has arthritis of the hip joint, as it just helps to open up that hip joint and sort of lubricate it and get a bit more movement. So there's just a few exercises to help improve your hip range of movement. If you are having any trouble with your hips, it'd be best to book in with one of our physios to have a look at your hip, assess it, and work out what's really going on, and then prescribe you the appropriate exercises.